I am Maria Dalton. I am turning 27 this year. I've been married for 5 years and have a son. My son's name is Martin, and he turned 4 this year. Initially, after getting married, I worked as a full-time employee, but now I work part-time at the same company. My husband is 30 years old, 3 years older than me. I was deeply touched by Kevin Carlton's passionate advances, which led us to go out and eventually get married. However, Kevin, who was kind while we were dating, changed his attitude after marriage, showing more of a domineering side. Kevin has a 20-year-old sister named Jane Dalton, and Kevin spoils her, perhaps because they are so far apart in age. Before we got married, I didn't particularly mind this and thought that Jane and Kevin got along well. However, after getting married, I began to notice various changes in her behavior. Jane often visits our house, and each time I end up running around like a maid because Kevin accepted her selfish demands. Jane comes to our house without any notice, regardless of the time, be it morning or night. Furthermore, Jane never brings any gifts or tokens of appreciation when she visits. Even when I am around, she acts as if I don't exist and speaks only to Kevin, saying, "Brother, I'm here again." And then Kevin, seeing a dinner that's obviously prepared for only 3 people, asks Jane if she'd like to eat. Of course, I intended to. When I try to tell Kevin quietly that I haven't prepared dinner for Jane, he simply tells me to figure something out since his sister is visiting. And in the end, I have to serve my portion of dinner to Jane. Then, loud enough for Jane to hear, he blames me, saying things like, "You should have been considerate enough to make extra food." Hearing Kevin's words, Jane looks as if she's about to cry and apologizes to me. Kevin comforts her with kind words and scolds me, saying things like, "You're not thoughtful," or "Don't be mean to my sister." Although Jane apologizes with words, every time I see that she is reassured by the fact that Kevin treats her more precisely than me, it seems she takes joy in it. I prepare my own meal from leftovers in the fridge, and just when I think I will start eating with Kevin, Jane, and Martin, Jane tells Kevin she has something she wants to discuss with him alone. "You should leave the table, Martin. Eat with your mom." Kevin moves me and Martin to another room. This isn't the first time he's done this. After Martin and I finish our meal and head to the kitchen for cleanup, I find Kevin and Jane chatting happily on the sofa. The dishes from their meal are still on the dining table untouched. They never bothered to clean up. I suspect they see me not as a wife or sister-in-law, but more like a maid. They never speak to Martin either. It's as if a maid brought her child to work. I cleaned up in the kitchen and was about to take a bath with Martin when Kevin called me loudly. Even though it was nearly 8 p.m., he said, "Jay wants to eat a cake. Go buy it now. Get the one they sell in front of the station," even specifying where to buy it from. Going to the cake shop will delay Martin's bedtime. As I hesitated, Jane said to Kevin, "I want it now," and Kevin hurried me. "It's okay if he sleeps late today. What's with that attitude when Jane is here?" Kevin started blaming me loudly. I knew I'd end up going to the cake shop, so I reluctantly decided to go. A cake shop near the station closes at 9 p.m., so if I hurry, I can make it. As I was getting ready, I overheard their conversation. They spoke loudly enough for me to hear, saying things like, "She's so inconsiderate," and "Why did you marry her?" I couldn't leave Martin behind, so I decided to take him with me. As I was getting him ready, I heard Kevin's loud voice from the living room. "If you defy me again, we'll get a divorce." Martin could hear it too. He might not understand the words, but I believe he knows his parents are fighting. Holding back my explosive emotions, I asked Martin, "What kind of cakey would you like?" He brightened up, saying, "Mom, I want a cake with lots of fruits." So, our journey to the cake shop was filled with talk of cakes, temporarily forgetting Kevin's words. Martin and I reached the cake shop just before closing time. Luckily, the cake Jane wanted was available. We bought 2 cakes and 1 fruit-loaded cake Martin wanted. Upon returning home, I served the cakes to Jane and Kevin. Then, I prepared Martin's cake and headed to the dining room. The moment I placed it in front of Martin, Jane pointed at it and said, "I want that cakey after all." Before I could react, Kevin moved the cakey Martin had chosen in front of Jane. Ignoring Martin's protests, Jane started eating his cake. "I bought that cake with the money I earned, and I have the right to choose," Kevin said to Martin. I couldn't hold back my emotions any longer and voiced my dissatisfaction to Kevin and Jane. Kevin then threatened, We can get a divorce, you know. Martin stopped crying but held my hand tightly, looking anxious. Then Martin, after some thought, said, "Mom, I also love cake with strawberries on it." "Yes, it's really delicious." He mentioned it while eating a cake that Jane initially wanted to eat. "I feel like I'm making Martin endure too much. There are 3 adults, including me, making a 4-year-old child put up with this." I lifted Martin's cake plate. The moment I saw Jane reach for Martin's cake after hearing Martin saying, "Yummy." "Martin, let's see over there." I took him to the next room so he could eat his cake slowly. Probably Kevin saw Jane reaching for the cake as well. He apologized to Jane, saying, "Sorry for being so stingy." I wanted to retort, but I held back, not wanting to expose Martin to the word divorce. Watching Martin innocently eating his cake with cream around his mouth is a sight that cleanses the heart. After finishing the cake, ignoring both Kevin and Jane, we decided to have a late bath and sleep in Martin's bed. The next morning, I woke up to find Jane had already left. I was about to wake up Kevin and Martin and prepare breakfast when I heard Martin crying and rushed to him. Shockingly, the piggy bank Martin had, which was given by my father, was broken, and the money he had saved up was gone. It was a ritual for him to say goodnight to the piggy bank before sleeping. Last night was no different. He said goodnight and went to sleep with me. At that time, the only people in the living room were Kevin and Jane. I asked Kevin about the piggy bank. Jane said she needed some money, so she took it from the piggy bank, he said indifferently, even though Martin was still crying. As I held Martin, who was crying and shaking, I could feel his hurt so painfully that I cried with him. It hurts to see Kevin prioritize and care for his sister Jane more than our son Martin. I felt a surge of anger and sadness at the same time. "Why are you making the atmosphere so bad in the morning?" "I feel terrible," Kevin exclaimed. "Don't you think you did something wrong? Martin is crying so much for the first time since our marriage." I expressed my anger towards him. I had always been careful not to argue in front of Martin, but I couldn't stay silent seeing him so hurt. Kevin looked at me intensely, went to the bedroom without a word, and came back with something in his hand. Shockingly, it was divorce papers, which I didn't even know he had hidden somewhere. "If you're not happy with me, then let's divorce," he said, shoving these papers at me, and then he left the house with a loud bang. Martin, who had never cried over the issues with Kevin and Jane, must have reached his limit. He has been crying since last night. I can't bear to see Martin so hurt. "Hey Martin, should we skip daycare today?" He was perhaps happy to be with me, and replied with a loud "yes," showing me a faint smile. Martin, after bringing a picture book from the bookshelf and sitting on my lap, looks up at me happily and says, "The teacher at the nursery today was Mama, right?" He looks like an angel. I think his little heart must be full of patience. Today, I decided that we would play as much as we can to fill his heart. I might be causing trouble at my workplace, but when I explained the situation, they kindly said, "Make sure to play a lot with Martin," and gave me a day off. In the morning, we went to the park, played hide and seek, and had a lot of fun in the sandbox and on the slide. When we got home and were having lunch, Martin seemed to be getting sleepy. He usually can nap by himself, but today he fell asleep on my lap, just like when he was a baby. I wanted to do the household chores while Martin was napping, but I thought, today is special, and decided to be healed by his sleeping face and breathing. While I was dozing off, suddenly I heard a noise from the entrance. It sounded like the front door had opened, but it wasn't time for Kevin to come home yet, so I was suspicious. I quickly grabbed Martin and, taking only my bag with valuables, hid in the bedroom closet. I felt someone entering the house and was holding my breath when I heard a voice. It was a voice I had heard somewhere before, and that person seemed to be searching the house for something. I can't find it. Where has that wife hidden it? For a while, I was trembling in fear due to the noise of rummaging, but as I listened carefully to that voice, I realized who it was. It was Jane's voice. I have so many questions, like why does she have a key and what is she looking for? But I opened the closet slightly to see what Jane was doing. She was roughly opening and closing drawers and doors. After letting out a big sigh, she started making a phone call. I searched where I was told, but it wasn't there. Yeah, I checked there too. If it's not there, it was a waste of time. Okay, I got it. "I'm going home now," she clearly said. "Kevin." I wondered what the two of them were looking for. I then heard the sound of the front door locking. After coming out of the closet, I put Martin to bed and thought about what had just happened. I'm pretty sure Kevin knows about his belongings. If they were searching for something whose location wasn't known, could it be one of my belongings? However, from the conversation earlier, I couldn't figure out why she had entered the house. Suddenly, Kevin seemed like a stranger, and I felt a mixture of disgust and fear towards him. I hurriedly packed the bare essentials for Martin and me. By the time Martin woke up from his nap, I was ready to go. "Martin, let's go to Grandpa's place now." With that said, we headed to the station and took a train to my parents' house. Luckily, my parents' home is nearby, just 2 stations away, so we arrived quickly. I hadn't contacted them beforehand, so they were surprised, but looking at my face, they seemed to sense something and welcomed us in without asking anything. Their pet dog, which Martin loves, immediately approached him, and they started playing together. Seeing this, I felt relieved and told my parents everything that had happened with Kevin and Jane, and that I had become scared to stay at our house. As you say, if Jane was looking for your belongings, it might be your cash cards. I hear my mother's words. I also thought the same. In fact, I have experience of launching a successful online shop for handmade goods with my friends when I was single. With me as the CEO in the handmade industry, I became well known. And when the shop grew significantly, I decided to get married. I wanted to prioritize raising my child, so I entrusted the company to my trustworthy friends until my child rearing settled down. Now I work part-time and mostly communicate with the company from home. The truth is, I'm still the CEO, but Kevin doesn't know that. However, he knows that I was a CEO when I was single, and probably suspects that I have a decent amount of savings. I've told him that I still get help from the company, but I've left the company matters to my friends, so he probably thinks I've stepped down from the CEO position. There's a reason I haven't told Kevin in detail about still being the CEO and about the savings. Soon after we got married, I realized that he's bad with money and spends all he earns. He only gave me $200 for food expenses a month and even told me to quit my job and become a full-time housewife. With Martin and only $200 for food expenses, it's tough to live, and I've never agreed to become a full-time housewife. Eventually, he reluctantly agreed to let me work part-time at the current company. Moreover, to ensure I wouldn't consider a divorce, he even made me sign a post-marital property waiver through a lawyer. Since Martin was born, I've only received $200 for food, so I've been using my savings for Martin's nursery fees and clothes. I've never asked Kevin for money beyond the food budget, so he probably thinks I have savings. Jane seems to be in dire need of money. And since Kevin thinks I have savings, he might be looking for my cash cards. It all makes sense now. I have a separate savings account that I am slowly saving for Martin. Every month, a portion of my salary is directly deposited into that account. Either way, there's a high chance these two are looking for my cash cards. They're both in need of money, and I can't think of anything else they'd be searching for. However, no matter how much Jane or Kevin search, they won't find it because I always carry my valuable items like my cash cards. There's still an unresolved issue. Jane might be coming and going from our house even when we're not there, and Kevin might be allowing it. My father advised me to keep my valuables at my parents' house, so I decided to store them in their safe. Why do they need money to the extent of doing such things? While pondering over the answer to that question, Martin came up to my father crying, explaining that his piggy bank was broken and he couldn't keep his promise to save up. My father's face turned red, and he became angry when he heard Martin's story. "I'll call Kevin and talk to him." My mother chided my father and said, "Now let's find out what their purpose is." My mother said that since Kevin is talking about divorce, he might say that it is our fault and make the divorce more favorable. So it is better to calmly find out what their purpose is now, so that they cannot escape with a suitable excuse. I decided to record their conversation in order to find out what the purpose was. My parents said they would consult a lawyer who was a friend of my father's and a longtime family friend, so we decided to go home. I arrived home and was cooking dinner when Kevin came home. I immediately started recording on my phone and kept the phone screen down so that he would not find it. To my surprise, he came home and immediately asked me where I kept my cash cards. When I asked him why he wanted to know where I kept it, he gave me vague answers as if he was trying to deceive me. When I remained silent, Kevin became numb and sad. "Give me all your part-time money for my sister," I replied. "I can't do that. It's for Martin's savings." Kevin became angry and pushed the signed divorce papers from his bag to me. "You're living off my money, so don't stand on me. You don't have to save for Martin," he said, as if he valued Jane more than Martin. After hearing these words, I silently stopped preparing the meal, put the divorce papers in the bag I had prepared, took Martin's hand, and went to the door. Kevin said in a loud voice, "Well, I'm serious about the divorce. Don't ever come back." "So," I said, "I will never come back to a house where a stranger can come and go as she pleases," and left the house. Was it too much to say my sister-in-law was a stranger? So after I left home, I received a large number of messages and calls from Kevin, but I ignored all of them, turned off my phone, and went to my parents' house. I then asked my parents to listen to the recording I had just made and also to look at the completed divorce papers Kevin had given me. My parents told me to do as I please. I had no love or affection for Kevin, but I still cared about Martin. They said that I should divorce him so as not to hurt Martin's feelings, but there is also a great possibility that if you divorce, you will hurt Martin's feelings. While I was struggling with this decision, Martin said he was hungry, so my mother made him hamburgers, his favorite dish. I couldn't hold back my tears as my mother told Martin, with a kind smile, "I prepared the hamburgers so that you and Mom can come visit us whenever you want." After taking a bite of the hamburger, Martin said with a big smile, "Grandma's hamburger is so good I want to eat it every day," he said to my mother with a big smile on his face. I said, "That's because this hamburger contains the feeling that I love Martin." And he took a big bite of the hamburger and put it in my mouth. "This hamburger with lots of my love in it is delicious, Mom. Please eat this hamburger with me and cheer yourself up." Touched by Martin's kindness, my tear gland collapsed. I tried to stop my tears, but they couldn't stop. My father told Martin, who was in a panic, "Mommy is crying because she's so happy that you gave her this hamburger. These are not sad tears, but happy tears," he told Martin slowly. "This hamburger is so delicious. If Jane were here, she would have eaten it," said Martin. Upon hearing this, the mother broke into tears and hugged him. Watching this, the father's eyes turned bright red. I said to Martin, "It's a blessing to be with family, isn't it?" He looked surprised and responded, "Didn't Dad say that only Jane was family? Is my family just Mom and Grandpa and Grandma?" My father replied gently, "Yes, that's right." He then continued asking Martin, "Do you want to live here with us as family?" To which he replied with a laugh, "Of course we're family," making everyone naturally smile. When was the last time we had such a natural meal? When did we last have a meal filled with endless laughter and conversation? Although I was considering divorce, this meal feels so happy that I finally decided to part with Kevin and plan to tell Martin about it. Discussing this made my heart heavy, but it seemed Martin never felt loved by his father and understood about the divorce, happily saying, "We will live as a family." And he happily hugged the pet dog, calling him my younger brother even though the dog is older than him. I started preparations for the divorce. Firstly, I quickly contacted a lawyer who was a friend of my father, and we arranged to meet the next day. That night, Martin slept with my father and the dog, and I remember feeling comforted by their faint laughter. I laid in bed in the same room as my mother and fell asleep reminiscing about my childhood. The next day, when I turned on my smartphone, there were over 200 calls and messages from Kevin showing his emotional instability. Just seeing it exhausted me, so I turned off my smartphone again. Today, I was able to discuss with a lawyer, explaining the details and confirming my intention to divorce. We successfully formalized the contract, and the lawyer will meet with Kevin tomorrow. After a while, the lawyer came to my parents' house to explain the situation. It seems Jane had accumulated a significant debt from the casino and her shopping addiction, and Kevin acted as her guarantor. When Jane couldn't make the repayments, a plan was devised to use my savings, and now Kevin wants me and Martin back and not divorcing me. The lawyer said the divorce papers I handed over at that time had already been submitted. When asked if this meant the divorce was accepted, the lawyer confirmed, "Yes, it has been accepted." Kevin seemed to have sobbed, saying that he doesn't want another man to get me, but hearing that everything was finalized gave me peace of mind. I expected disagreement about child support, but he even signed a pledge to pay $340 to Martin every month. Later, I received a call from Kevin. Feeling relieved after the divorce procedures, I decided to talk briefly. His tone lacked his previous aggression, and he calmly began talking. He believed that if he kept me financially bound, I wouldn't think of divorce. He also admitted to spoiling his younger sister Jane, thinking it was a form of sibling love. He wasn't indifferent towards Martin, but became jealous, thinking he had lost me to him. "Once I settled Jane's debts, I'll come for you. Please don't remarry till then," he said. But I firmly told him I no longer loved him and wouldn't reconsider. I could faintly hear his sobbing before he said, "Please be happy," and hung up. Did I manage to remain strong till the end? I discussed future life with my parents and decided to stay at their house until Martin grows up. He also transferred to a different nursery. I returned to my role as company president after explaining the situation to my work friends. Later, I heard that Kevin and Jane informed their parents about the divorce and their debt, resulting in both being disowned. More than the debt, they were furious about never seeing their grandson again. The once closed Kevin and Jane now live in a cramped old apartment, constantly blaming each other. They've brought this upon themselves. Today I'm happy being with my family.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked. We could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit any time, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick! What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1, if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread. hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.